Okay, yes, good, cool. Okay, well, again, thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed. I screwed up a little bit last time, but okay, we have this is Kate here. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Helps me build the channel. I have Jim Kavanagh, who generously consented to agree to be interviewed. His work has appeared on Counterpunch. He's been interviewed on Political Misfits. He's on Garland Nixon, A Critical Hour with Garland Nixon. He's had really interesting panel discussion on Press TV, and he has a Substack as well. He blogs at the Polemecist, and he has a Substack. I think that's about right. I just checked out your Substack recently. It's very interesting. I'll provide links to all this. Okay, so we're going to start off I didn't watch it actually, but on Thursday, I believe the House had a committee hearing on the Capitol riot last year, a year and a half ago, on January 6th. CNN was making a big thing out of that, CNN and NPR. I have a coworker who's really fascinated by that. I didn't get the point. I don't see if this has any relevance at this time. What would you say about that?
Yeah. I wrote an article about the January 6th riot. What was the title of it?
Yeah, I read the article. I forget the name of it, but yeah.
Yeah. Something like maybe The American Farce Unravels. I think that was it.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. First of all, what's happening now is that the Democrats are playing this up. They think this is going to be some kind of highlighting this is going to help them in the midterm elections or some elections in some way. And this is a theater of political theater, as was the Russiagate hearings and most of the stuff that goes on in Congress. But generally speaking, my reaction to January 6th, the first thing, my first instinctive reaction seeing it was, as a leftist, why aren't we doing that?
Yeah.
The problem with first of all, I don't think it was I think it's quite silly to think it was an insurrection or an attempted coup. There was no possibility of that. There was no plan for it. This is all just hoopla. The only people who were armed in that circumstance were the cops, and the only people who was killed on that day was a protester.
Right.
It was a protest a militant protest that got out of hand. And, I certainly didn't want to particularly care very much, frankly, whether Donald Trump continued as president or Joe Biden became president. And I think most of the protesters there's a cult of personality around Donald Trump for most of those protesters. But there was an issue there. Even there's an issue that was being argued there, whatever you think the merits of it were in this particular case. What the issue was, we don't trust the election. We think the election was stolen. And frankly, I don't know whether the election was stolen. I haven't looked very carefully at it. But that issue of the integrity and the confidence we have in the election system is a real issue. In 2004, the Democratic senators, led by Barbara Boxer, on January 6th, came in and said, we're not going to vote for the Electoral College results. And they were backed by civil rights groups, et cetera, because John Kerry probably had the election stolen in Ohio. And in 2000, an election was stolen probably. And the Democrats knew this both times. If an election is stolen, if you think an election is stolen, you should be furious about it. If you think that you had a presidential or any significant election stolen, you should be angry about it. So the only difference was the Democrats were in 2004, and they took to the streets in 2016.
Right.
Trump wasn't being polite about it. He brought the pitchforks out into the streets. And they argued about it, and they went, they had a militant demonstration, took over the Capitol. I want to make this clear. The only way people on the left are going to get the demands, the social demands that we want and we think are necessary, Medicare for all, minimum wage. You're not going to get these things unless you do something like that. Unless you scare the bejesus. You'll do it by scaring people. Chris Hedges said it, but that's what it means to scare people. They had to hide under their desk and run away into their offices. For a bunch of yahoos who were out there smoking dope and crashing into the. So look, I'm not. The police. And also, there's a whole element of it that's very strange about, the police at certain points, at least, let people in.
It's on YouTube. They opened the gate.
They opened the gates. Yeah. So, this was a mass militant demonstration. I've been at a number of mass militant demonstrations in Washington, D.C. against the war, at the Pentagon, etc. So, and it fizzled out. It was what it was. It was no plan to do anything else.
Yeah.
And now they want to make a big thing of it. And the danger here is that what they're doing is they want to, and the Democrats want to now outlaw and define as domestic terrorism. First of all, questioning the results of elections. And I'm going to say, I'm not in this argument about the 2020 election. I wrote articles in 2012 about how bad the electoral system is. I don't have confidence in it. Nobody should have confidence in it. It's easy. Hillary lost the election by 80,000 votes, even though she got 3 million more votes.
Yeah.
From on rules of the game point of view, she lost the election by 80,000 votes, and she went on, this is an illegitimate election, he's not our president, blah, blah, blah. Donald Trump lost the election by 42,000 votes or 44,000 votes in 3 states. Yeah. Could they have been cheated? From my knowledge of the electoral system, would have been very easy to do. I don't know that it was done. Not the case. The court cases will never adjudicate this well after the election. This is an issue, election integrity, and the transparency and honesty of elections that has to be raised and dealt with between elections. You can't do it the day after the election. Just can't do it. It's not going to work. So the people who were out in the streets there, Donald Trump wasn't worried about that between elections. He wasn't. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are really doing anything about our electoral system, starting with the Electoral College, going on to electronic voting machines, voter suppression, but also proxy voting in any way, shape, or form, mass proxy voting, even mail-in voting, putting drop boxes on the street. That's a problem. That creates problems. That eliminates the chain of custody. It eliminates secrecy. So you don't just brush that off because Donald Trump brings it up. That was brought up by the Carter and Baker commissions about elections well before. They said very clearly, mail-in voting is the biggest. Any kind of absentee voting is the biggest potential vector of fraud. So these are real issues that we have. Now the Democrats want to rule all that out. Anybody who questions voting is a domestic terrorist. Right. and so this is all. So there's 2 things about that. Yeah, the police had the right, of course, to stop this, and then they should have stopped it, and maybe more forcefully than they did. But on the other hand, one person was killed. It was a protester, and it was a mass militant demonstration that got out of hand and scared people. And we should be doing mass militant demonstrations like that scare people. You think that you're going to get what you need by electing progressives to Congress? You're wrong. You're not ever going to do it. It's going to happen because things like that happen. And we got to, if that had been a demonstration for Medicare for all and Bernie Sanders had been in Donald Trump's position, good. Good for him. Except Bernie Sanders wouldn't have brought the pitchforks. He doesn't do it. So
done that, yeah.
So this is what, and now what's going to happen is they're going to use this to create to prevent any future demonstrations like this, which means any demonstrations from the left. And they're going to go out and they're going to hunt down anybody who attended that demonstration and give them the maximum penalties and bring them in. People are being brought in for misdemeanor charges in shackles. This is not a good idea, and we should not be happy about it. People on the left should not be happy about it. This capitalist American state is not your friend, and giving them the power to crush demonstrations like this and to present political demonstrations as every political demonstration as an insurrection, and this is a threat to our democracy. This is just silly. The threats to our democracy, biggest threat to our democracy is that we don't have it, and that the electoral system that they're trying to defend now and excise any criticism of is not democratic at all.
Right, interesting, yeah. And they used the Capitol riot as a reason to ramp up censorship. Like one of the first things that happened, AOC was loudly calling, she's supposed to be on the left, she was calling for increased censorship. I remember there was an incident where a California-based leftist podcaster criticized AOC's take on the Israel-Palestine thing, and then the Capitol Police, who had a branch office in LA, investigated him. That's some pretty scary stuff. I was immediately pulled back. So yeah, there's been talk. You were interviewed with Garland Nixon. About this, Nina Jankowicz was like a minute. People call her Scary Poppins. She didn't last very long. She made this bizarre video, really bizarre. So as they're doubling down on narrative growth, she didn't last long. Like it was too obvious. But they'll probably try again.
Well, yeah, she came straight out of Glee and the high school play to run the Ministry of Truth.
That was weird. Yeah.
And I encourage everybody to watch her videos. They're quite fun. You know, the one that bizarre song about show me who I can fuck to get along, you know, to get ahead in the world. But it was a song. She was doing a number, but it was funny. But you don't mind if I curse on this? I can curse on this, can't I?
Yeah, sure.
But this is not over. Yeah, she's dropped out. But this is on hold. It's on pause. It's not over, okay? And they're defining this in a way that you know it's so clearly incoherent and incomprehensible because they don't want to say what they want to deny what they're actually doing while they say they're doing it. In fact, you know, one of these documents that came out on one of them, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, says the DHS should not try to make itself the arbiter of truth on everything. It should just focus on things that endanger its core mission. But then in another spot in the same document it says disinformation endangers our core missions. And what are the examples of disinformation? Oh, you know, questioning COVID narrative. So you are making yourself you're saying in one sentence, we have to be the arbiter of truth in order to secure our core missions, and on another side, we shouldn't be the arbiter of truth. We should just secure our core missions. So we shouldn't be censoring, but we have to censor, and that's what they're doing. And you see these bizarre, you know, discourses in which people are contradicting themselves and either not recognizing it, not capable of recognizing it, or not caring. And this is what's going to happen. It's not what's going to happen. It's what's happening. January 6th is one of this. This has started, at least with Bush in 2000, and all the liberals and left were outraged about it. You know, they're using this as an excuse to do away with rights, to do away with the right of privacy, to do away with the right of warrantless searches, to do away with the right of trial. You know, and now they use any event that happens that they can present as scary, and that may be scary, January 6th, we're going to do away with the right to protest against elections. We're going to do away with the right to show up at a demonstration that gets out of hand. You know, COVID, we have to do, as a pandemic, we have to do away with the right of people to question the quote unquote science, you know, and that's what they do with the gun laws too. Oh, we have now shooting, we're going to do away with right to own firearms. And people don't, you know, they present the whole media, the dominant liberal media narrative presents these things in terms that, we're doing this to protect vulnerable people, and which is always the narrative they use, and that gets them to get people to go along with, okay, we'll give up these rights, we don't really need them.
Right, interesting. Yeah, there's an attack on increasing attack on independent media. Look, Jackson Hinkle was the most recent guy. He was demonetized, and you talked about Kayla Maupin, Consortium News, Mint Press News were demonetized or blocked from PayPal or something. It's pretty insidious, pretty scary. it's like the earlier narratives are almost a rehearsal for what's happening now. Anyone who goes against NATO narratives is going to get in trouble. I mean, I have a small channel. I haven't heard anything myself, but there are YouTube guidelines. You're not allowed to criticize the dominant Ukraine narratives. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, well, they did the other day, 2 days ago, Jackson Hinkle, and there was one other guy, I forget now who was, who were both banned by PayPal at the same time. And this goes back to the Disinformation Governance Board, and they want to, they called operationalize the partnership between the federal government and the Department of Homeland Security, a police agency, a security agency, and the social media platforms, so that the social media platforms would do the work of censorship on behalf of the government. That's what they want them to do. And that's government censorship. That's clearly Supreme Court law. Government cannot pressure private companies to do its censorship job. That is government censorship. And if these social media companies had any balls, they would say to the government, if they really represented free speech and wanted to be a free speech platform, they would say to the government when they called them into meetings, we're not going to that meeting. You're not going to tell us what we can and can't. That's none of your business. Okay, they could do that if they wanted, but they don't, because the government has other pressures on them that they can exert. So the social media platforms are entirely arms of they're ideological apparatuses of the state, as we call Althusserian theory.
Right.
That's what they are. But the interesting thing that you point to is the financial. Again, this is like the sanctions regime overseas. That gets you by demonetizing you, by making it impossible. I don't depend on my channel. I don't get any money, frankly. A few. I'm going to have to try and do that sometime soon. But I get a few people who contribute to me, and I appreciate that. But there are people out there who have accrued a big following and get enough financial support from their channels that it allows them to keep on going, and it gives them a base of social stability and financial stability from which they can grow and which they can put their message out. That's part of what, in our society, substantive free speech means. You have the opportunity, as everybody else does, to establish yourself economically in a way that you can continue your work. So that's what they're going after. They're going with, this is a internal sanctions regime against political dissidents. There's nothing else about it. It's the state, it's the ideological apparatuses of the state and the financial apparatuses of the state, which PayPal is one of them. And they're doing this for political reasons. They're doing it to maintain the Overton window and to maintain the dominant narrative and to make sure that nobody who strays outside the Overton window and nobody who, quote unquote, sows distrust in government institutions, that's the job of dissident political speech, to sow distrust, is capable of doing so. So, it's a very, these organizations from PayPal and GoFundMe and to the media platforms themselves, Twitter and Facebook, have to be recognized for what they are. They're part of the ideological apparatuses of the state and the financial apparatuses of the state.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you see the Democratic Party as the force mostly behind this increasing censorship? Not that the Republicans are great either, but it seems to be like much of the security state and the military-industrial complex has coalesced around the Dems. And part of the Republican parties too, but not, there's a lunatic fringe of the Republican Party, Marjorie Taylor Greene and all that, but the majority seems to have coalesced around the Democratic Party, and they're the ones who are enforcing these narratives and ramping up the war with Ukraine and so on. Is there something to that?
That's the case right now. I mean, in the present, last few years, the Democratic Party has taken up that role. In the Bush years, it was Bush and who promoted that role. The Democrats were all against it and supposedly all against it. But then you saw what Obama did. He didn't go against it.
Right.
So now you're seeing, I'll analogize the Republican Party now is like Obama in 2006 2007, I'm all against Bush's reactionary repression, and he shouldn't be doing that surveillance with AT&T, but they came time to vote about it, he didn't do it. So what is the Republican Party going to do about it? They're going to use it for their political purposes, and they will successfully do so because it's a pole of attraction. People rightfully like the idea of free speech and of not people getting canceled and shoved off platforms because of their political views, especially when they're clearly being misrepresented. So they're going to use that, but the Republicans are all for anti-BDS laws and laws that require people to swear their loyalty to Israel in order to get a government contract in Texas or Florida or whatever. So I don't trust the Republicans on this any more than I trusted Obama in 2007. But the Democrats, what we see is that this was it wasn't just 2007. The Democrats and the liberal intelligentsia and the liberal political strata stood up vocally for free speech rights and anti-censorship rights for decades, and that's just disappeared. And they try to, as I say, make it sound like it's something else. Oh, we're not against free speech. We're just against doing things that sow division. What? We're not against free speech. We're just against speech that makes people uncomfortable, is hurtful to someone, we want to protect the vulnerable groups from feeling bad. I mean, this is anti-free speech. This is not, nothing else, but it's giving up on the idea of free speech. And so, the Democrats have embraced that whole program, and they think it's a great thing now. Not only they embrace it, they think it's a great thing. And they've given the Republicans the space to come out and believe, oh, we're in favor of free speech. And you're going to find crazy conjunctural specific issues where Republicans are definitely going to be better than the Democrats on this particular point and be defending free speech for today, for this week, for this election cycle. But, this is why it's important for people on the left to define for themselves and understand for themselves and embrace what they think the important political principles are and stick with it. It has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. Again, this is not a problem for me to say this about the Democrats, because the Democratic Party is nothing to do with the left. It's not, I don't have a kind of, as a leftist, I don't have some kind of default love for the Democratic Party at all. None. You got to get rid of that. And people have to get rid of that. And I'm like, oh, somehow it should be a problem for me as a leftist because somehow that's kind of the intrinsic magnetic pull to the Democrat. There's nothing to do. The Democrat Party is an anti-leftist, right-wing, capitalist, imperialist, counter-revolutionary party. That's its role, is to be the counter-revolutionary party and to kill the left. And it is the most effective political party for destroying the left in this country.
Right. Yeah, I think Juma Baraka called Obama not the lesser evil, but the more effective evil. That was an interesting statement.
It was either Glenn Ford or Bruce Dixon who said that.
Okay.
That was the Black Agenda report. Yeah, that was exactly right. It was a perfect thing. It's not a question of lesser or greater. Everybody voting for the lesser evil, people do lesser evil things all the time. There's nothing but lesser evil. But more effective evil is a more cogent way of putting it.
Right. I think Bruce Dixon first coined the term sheepdog about Bernie Sanders. Anyway, interesting.